So yeah, so thank you for joining us on this session, and thank you very much for SJP for allowing us to take part in this panel discussion. It's going to be a fairly wide-ranging one. This one, I think we've got loads of topics to discuss, and trying to cover everything in the time available is going to be tough. But I'm sure we can skim through things. And to get things going, I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves and a little bit about themselves and their business and what they do, and then we'll get into the meat of things. So, Thomas, could you kick us off, please?
Hello. So, yeah. Hi, Mark. Good morning, good afternoon to anybody who's listening. My name's Tom Verghese. I work for Enersys. Enersys are a large industrial battery manufacturer supplying energy storage solutions into the UPS sector. I've worked for Enersys for 25 plus years now, and I remember when batteries were basically dull, and people would tell you that what's a battery? It's a AA. And now these days, everybody's got an opinion about electric cars, and batteries are sexy and exciting. So it's nice that the world has come to me.
Well, it's certainly topical, Thomas. So hopefully you can give us a bit more background information on how batteries really work.
And how they're sexy and exciting.
I'm not sure about that. Torkild, over to yourself. If you'd give us a brief intro, please.
Thanks for having me on this panel. My name is Torkild Follaug. I work with Green Mountain. Green Mountain is a data center operator. We design, build, and run data centers. We have facilities in Norway, in UK, and we are also in the process of building in Germany at the moment. So Green Mountain is a rapidly growing company, and we will soon be one of the biggest Northern European players in this market. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you both of you. And I think it's nice that we've got a very sort of mixed panel here. We've got obviously a data center owner operator and someone who's at the sharp end, and obviously a supplier. And I think it leads very nicely into the areas we want to discuss. And essentially, we're talking around sustainability. And we all know the data center industry's got challenges in this area. Power availability, the use of power, the media pressure on us in terms of our power consumption. We then got power challenges, sheer availability of power, sustainability reporting, and a whole raft of new standards that are coming out of Europe and regulatory compliance. So we have a huge amount to talk about. But going on to what's coming out of Europe, I'm going to come to you first, Torkild.
Yep.
We've got sort of CSRD and EED coming in.
Yep.
We may talk about those in a bit more detail. But one of the key things that's come into Germany in particular is the use of waste heat. Or so-called waste heat, and it's a big topic in our industry. I think we all agree we have the technical capability to do this, but how realistic is it, and what are people doing in this area with regard to the waste heat?
Yeah, this is a question that is really on the top of our mind as well. We have been working with several initiatives on our Norwegian sites for some years now, and it turns out one of the major problems with excess heat, which I prefer to call it, from the data centers, is that it is a low temperature, and that creates all kinds of challenges when it comes to how you can exploit this and reuse the heat. So what we have done so far is that we have tried to find possibilities and opportunities together with partners that are able to more or less utilize this heat in the temperature that it is already. So what we find the most interesting is actually aquaculture, land-based fish and lobster farming, which we are into. The reason for this is that, of course, if they can use the heat as it is, this will be a much better business case than if you need more energy to pump the heat up. And this is, of course, when it comes to district heating, our temperature is too low, and this really creates some fundamental challenges on the business case. Because there will be fairly large capex investments involved in infrastructure, and also when it comes to already existing district heating infrastructure, this infrastructure is designed for a much higher temperature, and then it's difficult to come in with a low temperature such as 20 degrees or 25 degrees or 30 degrees, and really to make the situation for the users better. So it is difficult, and it is also difficult because we are dependent on what is the possibilities in close proximity. And you cannot transport this heat source, this heat resource for a long distance. That will require too much infrastructure. The capital expense will be too high, and you will not get the business case out of it. So there's all kinds of different challenges coming into play, but still there are possibilities, and we as a company. When we do our design and build, we build our facilities ready for offtake of excess heat. So that's a given in everything we do. And in addition to that, we are working proactively together with authorities, local, regional business communities to explore and to develop business cases that can be beneficial from our excess heat. But I think also what we need to see going forward is a bigger or more active governments. We need the regulators to look at this as a possibility, so that we can build new industrial areas, for instance, with businesses that can utilize excess heat, and also to work more with circular concepts between different kinds of companies and businesses. And we need also to have more support schemes for this kind of activity to increase the quality of the business.
So I think, in summary, I think this is often seen as a technology issue, to reuse the waste heat, and I always think it's not so much technology, it's actually A, commercial reality, and B, finding a customer. Not people actually don't really want heat, as you say, at a relatively low temperature. And I think your point about getting governments or local authorities involved at the planning stage to create that ecosystem, that local community that can actually take advantage, or local businesses taking advantage of what is, again, fairly low grade heat, is essential. But without that, we frankly, we're not in a position to make use of that heat.
No, I think you're right, and also I think we need to put more resources into research and development on low temperature heat, because nothing much has really been done on low temperature heat, because there's been plenty of high temperature excess heat from other kinds of industries, and this is fairly easy to utilize, but we need to engage the research institutes and also the support schemes
Yeah.
to really address the low temperature heat. Because if you sum up the amount of energy in Europe, for instance, it's enormous amounts of energy that is wasted on excess heat.
And not just from data centers. You know, we single ourselves out as being a bit of a target, but the reality is there are plenty of other industries that are not using waste heat or even considering using waste heat in the way we are. So.
Yes.
And Thomas, coming on to yourself, you know, we talk about waste the reuse of heat or you know, using that excess heat. But there are other reporting this is really, you know, should be based on standards. You know, there's no point in saying we're shipping out excess energy, you know, to a third party, unless you can really measure it and report it and make sure that's done properly. And I think the same is true of other resource utilization, be it water, be it our carbon outputs, etc., and trying to look at efficiency generally. So what do we have in the way of those standards? What's out there? What should we be using? What should we be reporting against?
Yeah, so I think underpinning all of this was the point that was made earlier about the circular economy, and that will drive standards, and that in turn will drive legislation, and we're seeing that come to pass already in terms of the efficiency that's going to be imposed on end users, whether that be the ISO 30134 family or the new battery directive. Both of those areas will basically aim to look not just at the use of the product, but almost at how the product was manufactured and what happens to the product at the end. So that's your basic definition of the circular economy, and then from there you're going to have, as end users or the users of whatever product, will be responsible not just for how they use it, but how they specify it in the beginning to ensure that they comply with the legislation, not just in terms of the detail, but in terms of the spirit of the legislation, and also what happens to the products, as I say, at the end of its life. And getting onto your report, your comment about reporting, I think that's going to be a big issue in the next decade or so. How you monitor all of this, you know, how you monitor your carbon use, not just on site, but the carbon use of your suppliers. And certainly as a supplier that's from a sustainability point of view, we're certainly beginning to look not just at how we use carbon ourselves and how that is passed on to our customers, but also in our supply chain, how our suppliers are using this. You know, a supply chain is very much a chain. And so, you know, there's no point in us reducing as much carbon as possible and then buying, you know, high carbon parts from elsewhere. And it's the same in terms of the recycling chain. You don't want to be, you could claim to be recycling, but you don't want to be, for example, exporting the issues to other parts of the world where perhaps the legislation doesn't apply. And I think that's those areas, those loopholes, if you like, are beginning to be closed now through standards and legislation.
Yeah, and I think you very nicely bring me on to the next question I had, actually, which was really about supply chain, as you say. And I think it's almost a two-part question. The first one is, you know, we talk a lot about scope 3, and you sort of hinted at it there without really mentioning it. You know, the embodied carbon that is basically incorporated throughout, you know, during the entire manufacturing shipping process that you know, through the entire supply chain. So we talk about it, but I think we've got some considerable way to go until we can really sort of have accurate reporting on the scope 3 side. And then as a follow-on, really, you know, supply chains are becoming incredibly challenged at the moment. You know, from the raw materials to the manufactured components. You know, we're waiting months, not weeks these days, for some of those, you know, critical components. So I'd just like to have your opinion on that scope 3, how you're dealing with it, how you're challenging your suppliers, and I guess being challenged by your customers, and then how you overcoming some of those current supply chain challenges.
Yeah. So to start with the scope 3, I think, as you say, you know, all of this is about how it starts with measure. to understand and measure exactly what you're getting in. Before you make any commitments to reduction, you need to have some understanding of where you are at the moment. And certainly from a scope 3 point of view, i.e. outside of our manufacturing sites, we've started that process now. We've started to publish results for our scope 3 as a whole entity, and we'd certainly be looking for that from our customers. As I say, though, it's also important that we understand what those numbers are, and I think it'll take a couple of years at least before we fully understand, and those numbers are also auditable. Yeah. So if we provide, a square box or of whatever to yourselves or to the customer, and they say, okay, where did this figure of 1.75 come from? You need to be able to stand by and go, actually, here is exactly where that figure comes from. And I think it's up to us as a customer with our supply chain and our customers as well to challenge those figures moving forward and to make those figures in terms of carbon would be a good example, auditable, to understand where they come from. Yeah. To get back to your second point about supply chain, obviously recent events has shone a light on the security of all the supply chains. And if you could forget about sustainability and just go through security supply, factories shut down based on the want of small components over the COVID time. So I think almost hopefully automatically and commercial reality is driving all companies to look at the security of the supply chains, whether that be just using multiple suppliers to understand where those suppliers are getting their components from. And then that's going to be the commercial reality. And I think that is not going to be driven by legislation quite so much. I think that's just something that companies have learned from over the last few years, whether it be chips is the classic example. Chip manufacturing came from one site and whole swathes of industry was shut down because they couldn't get hold of chips. My personal view is that we're in a much better place than we were a couple of years ago, to pick an arbitrary endpoint. But that said, we also need to, the memory will live on, and we're certainly going to be looking at security of supply if something bad happens in the future.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to pass a sort of similar related question over to Torkild. I mean, obviously, as an end operator, you're very dependent on your supply chain, both for components and systems delivery, but also for your scope 3 reporting. And I guess increasingly you are looking at your scope 3 reporting and some of the challenges associated with supply chain generally.
Yes, correct. And there are a lot of good work going on throughout our value chain now when it comes to climate reporting and climate auditing. And of course, our scope 3 emissions relates to our suppliers' scope 1 and 2. So we are dependent on our suppliers to do a good job in scope 1 and 2 reporting in order for us to have the scope 3, which is the big challenge. And what we see is that there are quite different levels of how mature our different suppliers and parts of our supply chain really is when it comes to climate reporting, and that's a challenge. What I do think is good is that new legislation is coming. We have the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which will come into play in a short time period. And this will really get us to another level or a new platform. And so my point of view is that this is really beneficial for us. This creates a regime where it will be easier if we do our work as we are supposed to. It will be easier for us also to report on our operations and connected with the value chain, both upstream and downstream.
Yeah.
But this demands a lot of communication. There's a lot of different systems that needs to be integrated and talk together. So this is a massive undertaking, and I think it will take time before we have numbers and reporting with a high degree of value to it, because at the moment there are a lot of uncertainty, and it's to say it frankly, a lot of guessing when it comes
I think guessing's being polite. I think a lot of
approximation.
Yeah. So but it's but it is good work is being done, but I think we have to acknowledge that this also will take time to get a certain quality into it. When it comes to the supply chain and the components and long lead items and such, yes, I do agree with what has been said. I think there is an imbalance in the market. And of course, we are experience extremely long lead times on certain components. So that's hurting us. That's hurting our customers. That's hurting our growth. And we certainly would like to see a more balanced market when it comes to certain components. So one thing is that it is it's not balanced, and the fact is that the supply side of it is currently too weak. And when it comes to data center industry, what we see is that the growth will just continue. And there's new major drivers coming into this market or are already in this market, as AI and other things. And this will really just raise the demand side, and really need to see something happening on the supply side of certain components and items. So that's one thing. The other thing, which is a construction for us, is grid restrictions and power supply.
Yeah,
this
for
is
sure.
also a part of the this is also a part of the value chain. And power is there is power, but the question is availability. And some of the investments that needs to take place in order to strengthen the grid in Norway and other places in Europe, for sure, it takes time. And the question is, will it keep up with the demand? Not only in the data center industry, but as you know, all industries, traditional industries, would like to electrify. So the demand side for electrification is huge, and it will only continue to rise.
I totally agreed. And you mentioned AI, and I'm going to come back to that point because it's the phrase on everybody's lips right now. So I will come back to it. But Torkild makes a really good point about the dependency on power, dependency on the grid, upgrading the grid, more power availability, etc. And we all know demand is just going to continue to increase. What can you do on maybe the battery side? We hear about BESS storage and that sort of thing. Maybe not as a primary power source, but certainly as a way to ride through lack of availability for various reasons, be it due to a dependency on PV or tidal or wind, whatever it may be. So what are you guys doing in that area, and where do you think the future lies on that?
So I think battery energy storage systems can be part of the overall answer. I don't think they'll, certainly in Northern Europe, I don't think they're the magic bullet that will solve all of this. It's very much a holistic approach. There's got to be, power is ultimately a limited resource.
Yep.
And clearly we need to invest in across the board in that, and that may include nuclear as well as wind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And solar in certain areas. That BSS will work to smooth across that, and it can be at multiple levels. It can be, for one, attachment to large solar panel or solar arrays, or it can be at almost at a smaller level where data centers themselves can use their energy storage assets to basically store or peak shave the energy that they're using. Ultimately, we have to see that all of these resources are limited in some way, shape, or form, and we can't just almost throw money at it and more of it will automatically appear. Apart from anything else, because again, we're going back to this circular economy idea, and we have to reuse and be efficient, whether we like it or not, and we'll be driven that way through legislation. So I think that's, and then the other thing I think we need to just be aware of is the performance characteristics in the specifications. I think one of the things that we're doing when we purchase is to begin to specify, we need these numbers, we need this performance, and I think we're expecting that from our customers as well. You mentioned right at the beginning about temperature, and maybe historically we've always used 20 degrees as the baseline for performance, and that set the bar, if you like. Now, if you set it a little bit higher, all right, you may end up having to pay more in whatever. However, by doing that, you're improving the performance and driving innovation from your supplier.
And I mean, on that note, I think one of the things we keep hearing about is obviously a lot of research going on into battery chemistries and what can be done. How far are we away from a battery technology that allows us to move away from lithium and maybe has a far higher power density than is currently available? I mean, I keep hearing about sodium, and all sorts of other things, and molten salt and all sorts of fanciful ideas, which I don't frankly understand, but maybe give us a bit of detail on that.
Yeah. So from if there was one round the corner, I think you'd probably end up being a billionaire, and I probably wouldn't tell you about it. My personal view is that clearly lithium batteries have been around for quite a long period of time now.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot that I think there'll be a technology that's going to be around for the next few years. I don't see something magic just around the corner that is capable of being scaled up, that is capable of being used across the globe. If you like, I think maybe the thing to look at is certain sectors, obviously defence being one. Will start to pick up on other technologies, and until those technologies start to penetrate those money no object type sectors, we won't be seeing them in wider society. Right. So my view is that it's lead, nickel, and lithium for the foreseeable future. I think personally, hydrogen will also play a role. How and where will be interesting, and fuel cells and the development there, I think will be interesting. How exactly they're used, but I don't think we should forget that the existing technologies can still be improved moving forward, rather than trying to put bets on long-term, highly speculative technologies.
Yeah, that's good to know. It's not around the corner then. Yeah. I'm going to come back to you, Torkild. I mean, no data center panel at the moment would be complete without a discussion on AI. But rather than sort of going into the generic, what is AI, or what could it be, or what will it be, I'd like to sort of focus on the specifics in relation to the data center sector. There's a lot of hype and maybe even hysteria about AI, but what does it really mean to a data center operator trying to accommodate AI workloads? We hear about massively increased density. We hear about the potential for huge amounts of increased power demand. What's the reality that you're seeing on the ground, and how do you think it will affect the sector?
Yeah, well, just to touch upon those two factors that you mentioned, density will will increase and or go up. And this is actually it's a challenge, but technically it's perfectly doable. And in sustainability point of view, the higher density, the better it is. With higher density and the suitable cooling solution, we will also be able to have a higher temperature out from the data center, which will again affect possibility to reuse the heat. So this is something that we are very much welcoming. And as you say, this is power demanding. I heard a lot of numbers out there, but to use AI is more power demanding than a lot of other processes on the internet, for instance. So this will, of course, also affect the energy market in a market where we already struggle with the availability. The demand from AI side will just come on top of that. And my personal view is that we are just at the bottom swing of the hockey stick. So we will see the demand for AI in data center increasing substantially going forward. So it really just adds to the magnitude of the challenges that we already have, and at the same time it opens some new possibilities. When it comes to locations, for instance, you will be probably able to locate some of these AI data centers in more rural areas. And that might be a good thing. The challenge then is, of course, transportation, and also the use of excess heat in rural areas is not that easy. So there's pros and cons. But as a company, we do see huge opportunities in the AI-driven market. So this will mean more business for us going forward.
And you're right. I think you make the point there that a lot of the workloads associated with AI are simply not latency dependent. The learning component of the LLMs, for instance, can be pretty much put anywhere. It's an HPC function, so put it where power is available, cheap, and you've got a climate that can help with the cooling side.
And that we are able to identify and locate pockets where power is available, but it's getting more and more difficult.
And where the power is clean as well. I think that's also an advantage.
Yes.
And I think, a lot of people are very quick to criticize AI, or not necessarily criticize AI per se, but the power consumption associated with it possibly. But Thomas, coming to you, I think, there's also an argument that, AI, as it evolves, could actually help with the problem that it almost creates. I think, there's an argument that says we can't really solve climate change without using far more intelligent, technical solutions, which might include AI.
Ultimately, again, finite resources. Therefore, we need to drive efficiency, and AI can certainly be used to drive that efficiency, whether it be in power grids, or development of products. But we're on, as you say, a learning curve. We have AI has been invented. It's out of the box. How we use it, it will be interesting over the next few years. And it'll certainly have benefits and change the way society works and how we all do business. It'll drive that along with legislation about sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, and as you say, I think we're at the thin end of the wedge when it comes to AI, aren't we? And we, at the moment we have something which we call AI, but possibly isn't really. But if AGI comes along, then I think that's an absolute game changer, and we'll decide what happens then. We'll panic at that point, possibly.
But we must see this as a really powerful engine for innovation in all sectors. And of course, every new technology will be used for good and bad. So, but let's focus on what we can do on the good side. And as we also know, is that digitization is a major tool when it comes to carbon reduction in all sectors. Because what we really are doing is that we are introducing new digital services to replace all the ways of doing things, which has a much bigger carbon footprint. For instance, this panel or this conference is digital. That's a much lower carbon footprint than if every one of us should be in one spot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Again, people tend to criticize energy consumption in data centers or whatever, but they tend not to appreciate the positives. The reduced amount of travel, the increased efficiency that we have. And I think there's something I always say, and maybe this is my opportunity to say something. I think again we're often criticised in the sector for the amount of power we consume, but as I always say, the buildings themselves don't consume the power; it's the IT load that consumes the power. We merely support the IT load and put hopefully a minimal overhead on top of that. But I think out in the public, people don't realise that their choices, their digital choices, are the things that actually drive data center consumption. If they are choosing to use TikTok or Facebook or whatever it is, their searches, they're uploading of photos are the ones that are creating the demand. So, be very, very careful if you criticize, because you're probably the problem.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And one thing is what we are using personally, but there are also easy to forget all the critical systems for society that is run by data. And so this is something people don't think about this, and they don't know it. So it's our task to tell them about it.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. So
and to be leaders. Sorry, and to be leaders, because we have an opportunity here where we're the data center area is growing, and you're clearly using more and more power, even relative to the rest of society. And I think we have the opportunity to lead in terms of the innovation and to be sustainable and to reuse products within the sector.
100%, yeah. I've been given permission to go on 5 minutes extra. We started a little late, so I've got a couple of minutes. The question to both of you, really, probably starting with you, Thomas. We're getting a deluge of ESG-based reporting coming into Europe, and I think Europe, well, the European Commission is taking a bit of a lead on this with CSRD and EED, etc. But we know the UK government's going to follow with something fairly similar. We know the US government's talking about it as well, and I suspect every other government on the planet is doing something. Absolutely. How are we going to actually cope with this deluge of reporting? And the answer might be AI, actually, having just said it. But again, how are we going to cope with this deluge? It seems to be, increasingly bureaucratic. We have a lot to deal with.
Yes, and that's a very good question, and I think it will take resource, and ultimately it will add cost. There will be, we already have. There will be people whose sole responsibility is to review energy density, to audit the energy density claims, etc., and we just need to accept that historically we've cost has driven innovation. Finance has driven innovation, and now it will be more than just finance. It will be sustainability that will drive that, and it will be part of the overall solution. It won't just be a cost and performance based. It'll be cost, sustainability, and performance that will drive a number of areas in society. And I think data centers and energy storage will be at the forefront of that. But the automotive sector and the move to EVs will be in exactly the same position. It's not just the data center sector that will do that. And as I say, it'll just be part of the expected package that you will provide to your customers.
Exactly. I mean, Last word to you, Torkild. Again, how are we going to overcome this huge additional demand in reporting and potentially accountability?
Well, I totally agree with what has been said, and I think also we need to realize that the ESG reporting will affect the whole organization for a business, and we need to engage all employees in this work. They need to raise awareness. They need to be more to have more competence on the ESG and ESG reporting, and we of course need to implement the systems that can help us deal with all this data, and also to catch the data that we need. I think my role in Green Mountain, I think it's a very important part of my role is to work down in the organization and really to engage every department and at every level, and to connect them to this work, and really also be clear about what are our ambitions, and how does this help us reach our goals and to support our ambitions. Because if we don't see it that way, it will be very hard to implement it and to get people do things differently if it's not anchored in a target that everyone agrees on.
So in the end, it comes back to humans communicating more effectively.
It's all about the people.
Brilliant.